section 6.4 is on the quadratic formula and the discriminant. The quadratic formula is really just another method of solving a quadratic equation. So far we've talked about graphing, we've talked about factoring, and we've talked about completing the square. They're all methods to accomplish the same thing. They're used to find the solution or roots of a quadratic equation. The new method involves using the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Definitely something you need to memorize. And here's an example of how you would use it. First, you have to get it in the right format, and the right format is basically your ax plus by plus c. We would typically, like that's for a linear equation. This would be for a quadratic equation. Okay, so we want to put it in this format. This is for your quadratic equation, which is going to graph your parabolas. This is for your linear, that's going to graph your lines. So what we need to do is bring your 24 over. And now I know my a value is going to be the number in front of my x squared, so that's going to be equal to 1. The b value is going to be your number in front of your x. This is your quadratic term, this is your linear term, so that's going to be a negative 10. And then this is your constant term, so that's going to be your negative 24. So always your a is in front of your variable squared, your b is in front of your variable to the first power, and your c is your number by itself. So now I just plug it into the formula. I have, in this case, a negative 10, because that's what your b is, plus or minus the b squared, which is 100, minus 4 times 1 times negative 24. Now, notice over 2 times 1. You've got a negative times a negative. I would go ahead and add the opposite here. Now, on this one, you've got to multiply before you can add. So you want to go ahead and do that last part. So you want to go 4 times 24, which is going to give me a 96. So this is going to give me 10 plus or minus the square root of 196 over 2. So you want to check to see if there's a square root of 196, which there is. It's 14. So you've got two equations. You have 10 plus or minus, well, actually we'll do 10 plus 14 over 2, and then we'll do 10 minus 14 over 2. So 10 plus 14 is going to be 24 divided by 2, which is going to give me an answer of 12. 10 minus 14 is going to be a negative 4 over 2, which is going to give me an answer of a negative 2. So those are your two answers, or your two solutions, or your two roots for that quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. Let's do another one. Again, notice that it is not in the right form, so we do have to bring the 30 over. I'm having a hard time focusing on that. So I have 2y squared plus 4y minus 30 equals 0. So I think what I would do here, now you don't have to do this, but it will make your numbers easier. Notice that everything can be divided by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and divide everything by 2, and I'm going to reduce it to this. And I'm allowed to do that because I can divide that term, that term, that term, and that term all by 2. All right, so A is going to give me a value of 1, B is going to give me a value of 2, and C is going to give me a value of negative 15. So I have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4 times 1 times negative 15 over 2 times 1. Okay, that's just plugging it into the quadratic formula. So again, I'm going to add the opposite of my second number. So I have a negative 4 times negative 15, which is going to give me a 60 So I have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 60 plus 4, which is 64 over 2. And I can get a whole number out of that square root. The square root of 64 is 8, so I have negative 2 plus 8 over 2 and negative 2 minus 8 over 2. So this is going to give me a 6 over 2, which is equal to a 3. And this one's going to give me a negative 10 over 2, which is equal to negative 5. So those are your two answers for that. Now, if you do not get a whole number when you take the square root of it, you're going to leave it underneath the square root. But you are going to break it down if you can. Now, if you're talking about just the number that is underneath the square root, so in other words, if you have the quadratic formula, the value of that right there is what we call the discriminant. If the discriminant is positive, there's going to be two real solutions or roots. If the discriminant is less than 0 or negative, there's going to be two imaginary roots. And if the discriminant is equal to 0, there's going to be one real root. So this one just asked me to find the discriminant. So the first thing I have to do is rearrange it again. So 4x squared minus 20x plus 25 equals 0. Now I can't divide all of that by any one number, so I'm going to have to leave that there. So all I'm looking for is the b. You know, I can go ahead and list the things out here. So a, b, and c. So I'm looking for b squared, so negative 20 squared, which is 400, minus 4 times 4 times 25. So when I do that, remember I have to do that last part first. So I have 400 minus, this is also going to give me 400. So I'm going to have a discriminant of 0. Now, if I go back up here, if the discriminant is equal to 0, then there's one real root. So if I were to have solved this equation, I would get one answer, and it would be a real answer. So let's find the discriminant and solve for this one. I think this is supposed to have a x there, so let's go ahead and do that as an x. So I have 3x squared minus 5x plus 2 equals 0. And I'm going to go ahead and put it in the quadratic equation. So I have a negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25. This is always going to be a positive number because you're going to square the b. Minus 4 times a times c over 2 times a. So I have a 5 plus or minus. I got to do this part first, so I have 12 times 2, which is 24. So that's going to give me 25 minus 24, which is going to give me a 1 there. Oh, and I forgot to put the a here, so that should have been a 3. Okay, over 6. Now notice the value of the discriminant. Equals 1. So that's a positive root, so there's going to be two real roots or solutions or zeros. Okay, to find out what they are, the square root of 1 is 1, so I have 5 plus 1 over 6, and I have 5 minus 1 over 6. So this is going to give me a 6 over 6, or a 1, and this is going to give me a 4 over 6, or a 2/3. Okay, so those are your two real roots, the 1 and the 2/3. All right, your homework on this is page 357, 16 through 27 even.